Hi, this is Wayne Zell, and welcome back to Blueprint for Wealth. And our special guest portion today, we're featuring Michele Nakazawa, who is now the former EVP, Executive Vice President and Chief Financial Officer of Telos Corporation. Welcome, Michele. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Wayne. I appreciate it.
I say former because why? What happened?
Because as of about a week ago, we officially announced both by public press release and SEC filings that I'm working towards retirement. And I plan to stay on at Telos still on the executive team, working directly for the CEO, but giving sort of a nice timeline for transition, basically as long as they need. I'm an indentured servant still, so I'm not really out the door.
Well-deserved retirement. You've been working awfully hard these days.
It's been a long, hard haul.
That's right. That's right. Well, we'll get into that in a second. But before that, I mean, Michele, where did you grow up? Where were you born? Where did you spend your youth?
Yeah, so I was born in Pennsylvania outside of Philadelphia, went through sort of Catholic schools there, and then my parents moved us in, I think it was the 7th grade. So 8th grade, I started at a Catholic school in Baltimore, Maryland. Mm-hmm. Then I went to public school there for 4 years for high school. And after that, I stayed in that area and went to Goucher College, which at the time was an all-women's college.
Right.
And I went 4 years there, got my bachelor's degree in chemistry.
My sister-in-law went to Goucher. When did you graduate from Goucher?
I graduated in 79.
Well,
so loved it.
It's a great school.
It's a great school.
It's a great education. And you were a chemistry major.
Chemistry major.
So did you become a chemist?
I did, actually.
Did you really?
I did become a chemist, yes. I actually worked for the Gerontology Research Center as a piece of NIH up in the Baltimore area. And I also worked at the University of Maryland hospitals, basically, in one of their labs doing research for a short period of time.
So how did you get into accounting of all? That's a huge difference between the science of chemistry and the so-called science of accounting.
Yes, it is. So it's a big transition. Everyone always asks me that. And I used to say I should have just made a tape so I could play it for everyone. But basically...
Well, we're doing that right now.
Exactly. So now I don't have to say it anymore. I was just trying to decide where to go with my life. I knew I wanted to go on further and pursue more advanced degrees, especially in the sciences, because you're going to be sort of a lab assistant unless you really go on and get like a PhD or something. But I wasn't sure at that point that I wanted to focus down on like one enzyme for the rest of my life. So I thought about it, and I had some advisors, and they said a lot of people try to combine business with chemistry and maybe work in pharmaceutical research or other scientific fields where they need sort of a combination of the 2 degrees. So I thought that was intriguing. I took a few business classes locally in Baltimore, and then I decided I would actually pursue a master's degree in an area of business, which in the end was accounting. I had applied to American University. I got a research assistantship there where I was basically an advisor, graduate assistant. Mm-hmm. So my whole graduate school was paid for. So that seemed like the way to go. And I worked my way through getting a master's degree in accounting.
And what did you do after you got your master's in accounting?
I actually worked for IBM for quite some time. I think it was 10 years perhaps. And then I decided that
locally? Were you here locally?
I actually was in Manassas.
Okay.
And at the time it was their Federal Systems Division, which they sold off. That wasn't my fault. I didn't do that. But believe it or not, I retired from IBM because I was actually starting my family.
2 beautiful daughters.
I had two kids at the time, and we actually did something pretty innovative at the time for IBM in that they offered a friend of mine who was in a similar situation with 2 children at the time, same ages, to actually job share a position. So we covered the full-time position by splitting it, 2 days of the week, 3 days of the week, et cetera. And that worked really, really well.
How long ago would that have been? Job sharing, that's way ahead of its time.
It was ahead of its time. Gosh, you're really making me think back now.
That's okay.
It was a long time ago.
Ways back.
But yeah, so IBM was great to work for. It was very innovative. they let us do that. And then the friend that I was job sharing, she basically was going to have a third child, so she was going to kind of step out of the picture. So I worked there for a bit longer, but then at some point I decided I needed to focus on family. And at the time, they were offering an early retirement package. So I went to my boss and I said, "Can I take this early retirement?" And he's like, "But you're not who it's geared for. It's geared for old folks like me now." But, I was young then, believe it or not. But IBM made it work. So I actually got, a decent package to leave at the time. It's not like what people who were really on the threshold of retiring got.
Right.
But I was able to take off at that point and focus on the kids when they were little. And that's
So how long were you out of the workforce and in the mom workforce?
I want to say just a few short years, maybe 3-4 years. And then I basically started doing a few things with my accounting degree on the side, some accounting for some small businesses.
Mm-hmm.
And then I actually got in a position where I was ultimately the controller at a small government contractor. And I was able to make that flex around the kids' schedule where they would be in school and then I would be able to get home in time for them. So I really didn't want them to be sort of in a daycare situation at that point. So there was, it worked out. There was time between my husband and me. We were able to work the schedule together and basically take care of the kids and do that part-time schedule. And then as they were, older in school, I started working longer hours and
very long hours.
Yeah.
When did you
ultimately long
ultimately?
hours,
When
yes.
did you go to Telos? That's a while
I
back.
went to Telos in 2004.
Okay.
In the interim, after IBM, I had gone to another small government contractor that ultimately was bought out by a Belgian company. Very close friends with that Belgian family still, so got that a little bit of international experience, and I was the CFO there for the U.S. division, or the U.S. entity. And then I ended up finding my way to Telos through a mutual friend who knew another Telosian that I know that you know, who was
Telosian.
the chief operating officer.
Yes.
So he interviewed me. I didn't really know him at the time, and that went well. So then I had to go through an interview process with 4 others, including our CEO at Telos is John Wood, and we hit it off, and I've been there for 17 and a half years, so as the CFO.
And what was it like going from a privately held government contractor to a publicly traded company on one of the big exchanges? What was that transition like? What did you learn? What were the challenges for you in that whole period? Because that's a major shift.
It was a major shift. It was perhaps less of a shift for us because we actually were a public company prior to going through the most recent IPO. We were a public company because we had a public preferred stock instrument that was traded on the exchanges.
Fascinating.
But so we had to go through all the pain, if you will, of all the public filings. So we're very familiar with that, all the SEC requirements and the compliance requirements and the audit requirements, without the benefits of having access to the actual capital markets for capital and resources. So we had a piece of the puzzle already down and known. The new piece was when you have now an IPO and a common stock and it's publicly traded, you get a lot more interest. You have a lot more to deal with investor relations and earnings calls. And that was sort of the heavy lift for us, is getting used to that and being a lot more high profile in the markets.
How was the preferred stock already registered on the Securities and Exchange Commission? How was it treated as publicly traded at the time?
That was an instrument, I want to say, from 1990. So it had been publicly traded from well prior to my time.
And so for every year that you were there, you were doing all these filings
every year.
So it wasn't that new of an experience.
The filing portion was not a new experience at all.
Well, then that's, I guess I'll speak from experience because I've taken a couple of public companies public in the past myself, and I found that the actual registration process is extremely rigorous.
Yes.
Very, very difficult.
Yes,
and then now with Sarbanes-Oxley and all of the other reporting requirements that we've got, I imagine it's just a 24/7 job.
Yes, it is. And it certainly is going to be a heavy lift for the new CFO at Telos now, because one of the things that did change, because we only had a public preferred stock, we basically were what's called a non-accelerated filer. So we didn't have to have, for example, the audit of internal controls or ICFR that is required based on your filing status by the SEC in accordance with Sarbanes-Oxley 404. But now we have passed that measurement threshold. We will have more accelerated filing deadlines, and we'll have the additional burden of the audit of internal controls. So that's going to be a significant shift for Telos going forward as of next year.
What was it like going through that process with your comrades in arms? Ultimately, taking the company public, and then the ongoing experience of having to do these filings, and the reporting calls for the analysts. And what did it feel like? What was the experience that you had emotionally? Because we all know it's very rigorous in terms of the reporting requirements. But what was it like for you emotionally and as a team? How did that affect you all?
Well, we were doing it during COVID. So that was the extra layer of complication. So as a team, most people were quarantined, but we really needed to be together in the office. So we had, even though most of our 300 and some employees that are in our Ashburn location were offsite, we had a very small core group that came into the office during that time. We called it our quarantine. And basically we worked together days and nights to get through the registration process. So it was really a lot of work. It was exciting. It was nerve-wracking, obviously not knowing where we were going to land. We had some internal bets because our bankers felt that when we filed our registration statement, we would perhaps not get an SEC review since we had already been a filer. I didn't agree with that. They were right. Some of the lawyers bet on that, and apparently there's some debts owed there back and forth.
Dinners and baseball games.
Exactly. So that was good. That made it a little bit easier for us. And frankly, it was a very condensed timeline because we made the decision, I feel as though it was in June.
Yes.
And we had our IPO in November. And if you're familiar with that process, that's a really short timeline to go through.
That's very short.
Very short.
Very accelerated. Now you're on the verge of retiring, although I know that John Wood's not going to let you go quietly into the night, but you are on the verge of turning over the mantle. What are you going to do in retirement? What do you want to do? What are your aspirations?
Well, I'm still an indentured servant to Telos. I have promised to John, even though I'm not the CFO, that I would stay on for a healthy transition for Telos. But you can see by my wrinkles that, that clock was ticking for me. So, but now basically I want to enjoy family. I have 2 daughters who are happily married with 5 grandkids. I'd like to spend a lot of time with them and then just give myself a little bit of time after a timeline. I'm not sure. However Telos needs me, I'll stay there as long as needed, whether that's 6 months or a year. And then just try to do a few things to enjoy myself. Still trying to figure that out. I'm actually reading articles on what to do, life after CFO, and I haven't gotten through the articles yet. So when I read them, I'll let you know.
Are there articles on life after CFO?
I was reading one that's been put out by Deloitte. So we'll see.
I mean, certainly you could do consulting and things like that.
Certainly consulting, perhaps boards,
yes.
Charitable work, charitable boards.
The charitable work is something that's appealing to me. There are so many great charities locally that we can help out.
Correct.
What is your passion? I mean, is there a cause that you really would like to further in these days coming up?
Well, I've always liked, I guess maybe the scientist in me. I've always liked kind of health-related areas. I was previously on a board at the Loudon Community Health Center, so things like that are perhaps appealing. I am a woman. I know. I am a member.
Successful one.
I am a member of 100 Women Strong, which is a Loudon philanthropic group, and I hope to continue in that group and continue with the causes that they advocate for locally. So those are the areas that to me come to mind most quickly without giving it a lot of thought.
So where do you see the world of government contracting going in the days ahead?
I feel like where Telos is positioned, especially in the cybersecurity space, we all see what's happening all the time with all the hacks, etc. I feel like I'm speaking from a Telos perspective, but government contracting, especially in that area, I see that as a growing area and a very exciting opportunity for both Telos and any other government contractor in that area. I feel like it's expanding and will continue to expand as the threats heighten.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's astounding how threatened we are as a population, but as businesses are more exposed, companies like Telos are really protecting us.
That's correct.
Protecting the government, which is trying to protect
government and
business.
Protecting other commercial entities and cloud environments, for example. We're all putting more and more data out there in the cloud, so we need more and more protection. And the hackers are smart, so the bad guys are unfortunately smart. So
They are. They're very smart.
Smarter.
What if you had to give advice to a young woman or a young man who's coming through college, they're graduating, they're getting their graduate degree in accounting or finance, what would be your advice to them today?
Well, first of all, I didn't, as I've said, pursue accounting initially. So I would say pursue your passion, and that path can change. So think broadly about what path you want to go on. Don't always feel limited. But once you've found your path, it takes a lot of hard work, and you really have to love what you're doing. I've definitely put in the long hours, but it's very rewarding in the end, and it's very exciting, and there's a lot of opportunities out there.
What was the greatest challenge you faced as an executive over the years?
Well, at Telos, I think prior to having access to the most recent capital, we were resource constrained. So we always had to really run a tight ship. And we had some activist shareholders, for example. So we had to work with them and resolve that. And in the end, we were able to do that, frankly, as of the time of the IPO. So those were the two biggest hurdles over the years that I was there.
Do you think shareholders are becoming more activist in these days and times?
I think so.
Do you think it's good for the economy or good for companies generally?
It depends. I think if it's smart activism, yes, but sometimes I think it goes too far.
What would smart activism involve?
I think if there are cases truly of corporate governance lapses, you feel as though you can obviously see things that the company should be doing and aren't doing, or vice versa, they're doing things that they shouldn't be doing, then that's the right time. But oftentimes I think they're looking for any excuse for perhaps explanations of just operational performance that maybe is not up to what they are hoping for, but not everyone's perfect. So if then they're just looking for something to pick on, then that's the wrong time to be an activist.
Yeah, and that's not a good activist either.
No.
That's a negative connotation to the activist shareholder.
Exactly.
Well, we've been talking with Michele Nakazawa, and Michele, it's really been a pleasure to get to know you and to have you on Blueprint for Wealth. And all I can say is congratulations on a very successful tenure as the EVP and CFO of Telos, and I wish you absolute calm and peace in the coming days after you've been able to extricate yourself from the daily rigors of being a CFO.
Thanks, Wayne. I appreciate it.
A great company.
Maybe you have to catch me at like the lake or looking at a mountainside or something as I try to relax.
That'll definitely make you feel better.
Exactly.
Thanks, and thanks for listening to Blueprint for Wealth. Tune in next time for a special topic and a special guest. Have a great week.